everyone. So real quick, I just want to share this cool thing that my therapist gave me. As I've been very clear on this channel before, I am diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. It affects my relationships. It makes things like poly almost impossible for me. I have a lot of problems with that, and it causes very extreme emotions, as you can ask anyone on my Discord. I try to do my best to rein that stuff in, but it is hard. But interestingly, I wanted to share this interesting concept. My therapist shared with me this concept to be called limerence, not to be confused with liminality. Limerence is a state of mind which results from romantic or non-romantic feelings for another person and typically includes obsessive thoughts, fantasies, and a desire to form or maintain a relationship with the object of love or have one's feelings reciprocated. Limerence can also be defined as an involuntary state of intense desire. So this literally is basically just borderline, like in a nutshell. Like when I try to explain what it's like to instantly fall in love or get crushes, this is it. Like this is basically what it is. Psychologist Dorothy Tenov coined the term limerence from her 1979 book, Love and Limerence, The Experience of Being in Love, to describe a concept that had grown out of her work in the mid-1960s when she interviewed over 500 people on the topics of love. Limerence, which is not exclusively sexual, has been defined in terms of its potential inspirational effects and relation to attachment theory. Good shit. It has been described as being an involuntary, potentially inspiring state of adoration and attachment to a limerent object involving intrusive or obsessive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors from euphoria to despair, contingent on perceived emotional reciprocation. So, I wanted to share this because I think it's a really interesting idea. This idea of like almost uncontrollable and overly intense, almost like a feeling so strong that it essentially is like forcing its way into your mind. Has anyone else had that experience with a relationship? Have you ever had somebody that like, I know this is cringe to say because we talk about healthy relationships and stuff, but be honest with yourselves. Have you ever been in a relationship where you essentially kind of interacted with someone in that way? Where they were just sort of someone you couldn't get out of your head. They were constantly there, constantly stuck. Almost intrusive levels of thought. So the components of this idea are intuitive thinking and fantasy. During the height of limerence, thoughts of limerent objects or persons are at once persistent, involuntary, and intrusive. Such intrusive thoughts about the LO, the limerent object, appear to be genetically driven. Indeed, limerence is first and foremost a condition of cognitive obsession. This may be caused by low serotonin levels in the brain, comparable to those with people with obsessive-compulsive disorder. All events, association, stimuli, and events return thought to the limerent object with unnerving consistency. So there are some citations needed, because this is more of a concept than I think an actually fully researched thing. But I think it's really interesting. This is how I experienced for a long time my relationship with Zena, or some of my other long-term relationships. The way in which, like, especially in the early parts of the relationship, there's this just deep longing. You can't get them out of your head. They just keep showing up again and again and again. Deep fear of rejection, that sounds familiar. That's like borderline 101. Limerence develops and is sustained when it is certain balance of hope and uncertainty. The basis for limerent hope is not in object reality, but in reality as it is perceived. The inclination to sift through nuances of speech and subtleties of behavior for evidence of limerent hope. So you ever do that thing when you have a crush and you're like really into that crush? And like that crush is everything you look for, every single thing. You are at some level attempting to figure out a way to connect it back to this feeling of unrelenting hope. imagine that. You're reframing your thoughts. You're sort of aiming towards this thing. And almost obsessively, you try to start stringing the pieces together. Now, obviously, we can take this into a dark place. We can talk about obsessive relationships, stalking, stuff like that. I'm not going there with that because A, that gets weirdly ableist towards borderline people, which, to my understanding, don't do that more than the rest of people. But also just because I don't really think that's what we're aiming at in this conversation. I think it's more just I guess I want you to understand kind of these nuanced feelings and some of these difficulties. If you're someone that deals with this stuff, either due to a borderline diagnosis or because of attachment issues or whatnot, you're probably pretty familiar with this stuff. Like, one of the big parts of this is loneliness, significant more susceptible to limerence. Duh. I hate being alone. Effects of this. Physical effects of intense limerence can include shortness of breath, perspiration, heart palpitations. If there is intense anxiety, incorrect behavior may torpedo the relationship, which may cause physical responses to manifest intensely. Some people acutely feel these effects either immediately or following contact with a limerent object. Blended is dire ecstasy or keen despair, depending on the turn of events. Oh, God. Think about, that language, though, guys. That's so fucking powerful. Like, dire ecstasy. Shit sounds like something you fight in D&D. Like, keen despair. There's something incredibly powerful. Psychologically, awkwardness, stuttering, shyness, confusion. Sensitivity that stems from a fear of rejection can darken the perceptions of limerent objects' body language. Yeah, so you start reading into the person. Sometimes it's hope. Sometimes it's like immediate failure or despair. So here's an interesting one. So sexuality. Awareness of physical attraction plays a key role in the development of limerence. Now, I would say to this, it'd be interesting to meet some asex folks who, by definition, experience limerence, but from an ace perspective. I think that would be really interesting, because I'm guaranteeing you it's possible. Not from the physical attraction idea, but more from the idea of just attractive to the person. Not on a sexual level, but just to the person as they are. I can see that being true with demi people as well. But it's not enough to satisfy limerent desires and is almost never the main focus. Instead, the limerent focuses on what could be defined as the beneficial attributes. Nevertheless, Tenoff stresses that the consistent results of limerence is mating, not mere sexual interaction, but also commitment. Yeah. So this falls into some of the things I've dealt with, where I see someone who's cute, and I'm like, wow, I really like this person. And then I get flooded with thoughts of all the ways I could be with that person. It's just a load of fantasies that intrusively fill my head of all the ways we could be together, all the ways that like we could have an amazing relationship, all the ways they could fulfill my needs, and I don't know any of this shit. Limerence can be intensified after a sexual relationship has begun. True. With more intense limerence, there is a greater desire for sexual contact. Also true. However, while sexual surrender at one time indicated the end of an uncertainty felt by the limerent object, because in the past, a sexual encounter more often led to an obligation to commit. In modern times, this is not necessarily the case. So if you have a friend, and let's say you guys are in a really cool, very pog, very progressive, friends with benefits kind of situation, and you develop feelings, you get the fifis, right? Pineapple Dandy, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm sorry. But you get the feelings, and you guys keep, getting together on a Friday night, banging it out and, watching Netflix or whatever. And now it's even more painful because you have a taste of what you want. And I don't mean in the dirty way, you bastards. But in the sense of like, you've now had the experience and now you want it. You want it more. Again, akin to drug, right? The sexual aspect of limerence is not consistent from person to person. Most limerent experience limerent sexuality as a component of romantic interest. Some limerents, however, may experience limerence as a consequence of hyperarousal. In such cases, limerence may form as a defense mechanism against limerent object who is not perceived initially as a romantic ideal, but as a physical threat to the limerent. That's uncomfortable. That's kind of Stockholmy, or when like people like fall for a guy who could clearly break them over, break the person over the guy's knee. Oh, that gets rough. I sadly probably have been there. Anyway, sexual fantasies are distinct from limerent fantasies. Limerent fantasies is rooted in reality and is intrusive rather than voluntary. Think about that. Regular sexual fantasies with a person is you and sort of bring, you might get a momentary thought and then you kind of follow through and then, hands start doing stuff. You the normal. But with this, the fantasies are almost intrusive. In times you don't want this. Sexual fantasies are under more or less voluntary control and may involve strangers, imaginary individuals, or situations that could not take place. Limerence elevates body temperature, increases relaxation, a sensation of viewing the world with rose-tinted glasses, leading to a greater receptiveness to sexuality and to daydream. People can become aroused by the thought of sexual partners, acts, situations that are not truly desired. Whereas every detail of a limerent fantasy is passionately desired actually to take place. Limerence sometimes increases sexual interest in other partners where limerent objects is unreceptive or unavailable. By the way you're describing this, I feel like I've gotten some experience that are somewhat like limerence. I'm not sure, as I'm demi or ace, the experiences for me don't match right. Well, and being ace might distort that, right? I don't mean that in a negative way, but being ace might if you were demi or ace, maybe it doesn't feel like that deep sexual attraction. Maybe it's a deep crush or interest. I don't know if you have limerence pros, renegade. I'm not diagnosing anyone. Last time I did that, I started a YouTube war. And I didn't even actually do it. They just made shit up. So, my point is that if you are ace or demi, you're going to have to figure out how that kind of works within your framework. Right? But this is a really interesting concept, and I wanted to share it with you guys because, and this is really interesting. The limerent reaction is composite reaction. That is, it is composed of a series of separate reactions. These reactions, now it says no site source, so this seems to be coming from the writer. So again, take this with a grain of salt, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. Pineapple Dandy poorly. They said, wonder how the involuntary fantasy sits with RGR's ethics of imagine having sex with someone bullshit. Not well, because her actual takes don't work with human psychology, including everything we have on research as far as kink. She's just a hater, guys. Come on, let's move on. These reactions occur only where misperceptions meet adversity in the context of a romance, perhaps because of this unique specificity. Specificity, limerent reactions can be uniquely quantified and predicted according to the schema described below. Involvement increased and obstacles are externally imposed or if the limerent object's feelings are doubted. Now I want to come down to this part because I think this is really interesting. The course of limerence results in a more intrusive thinking pattern. This thinking pattern is an expectant and often joyous period with the initial focus on the limerent object's admirable qualities, crystallization. Then, under appropriate conditions of hope and uncertainty, the limerence intensifies. Sounds like a meme. The limerence intensifies. With evidence of reciprocation, real or imagined, from the limerent object, a state of extreme pleasure, even euphoria, is enjoyed. Thoughts are mainly occupied with considering and reconsidering what is attractive in the limerent object, replaying whatever events may have thus far transpired with the limerent object. After this peak, at peak crystallization, almost all waking thoughts revolve around the limerent object. After this peak, the feelings eventually decline. Like, that was something I really struggled with psychologically, feeling like a creep. I can't imagine how much it would have been to someone if I heard RGR's bullshit then. Like, guilt. True. Like, I need everybody to understand this. Like, your feelings aren't voluntary. You guys get that, right? Like, this is something me and Zena have discussed many times. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts and feelings are somewhat coaxed by voluntary behavior, but they just come up for random stuff. You get intrusive thoughts. I dare you to sit in meditation tonight for 5 minutes and not have a random thing come up. Very Rona, kind of. I would say they're more an interaction of bodily sensation with cognitive interpretation. That's what feelings are. And yes, intrusive thoughts go burr. So understand this is that like feelings and thoughts are something that absolutely you have no control over. You can kind of mess with them a little bit, kind of tweak them, do things. But at the end of the day, there's something we can't fully control. And again, none of this is justifying any weird-ass behavior. I just think it's an interesting idea. I'll post this in the links below, but I really think this is interesting for people. Now realize there's citations needed. Obviously, you know, one can make an argument about whether or not this is valid or not. But I think when we're talking about these types of things, I think getting a little bit more philosophical and less data-oriented is okay, as long as we realize that we have to kind of, you know, take it with a grain of salt. So I wanted to share that with you guys. So I hope that was enjoyable. Maybe we'll play with this concept more as I play with it in my own personal work. But yeah, Zena, do you have anything on that before I finished up?
No, that's about...
Okay, yeah. You feel pretty good with that? Okay.
Yeah, that was kind of a you thing, so...
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll see you in the next one. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.